Welcome back to another episode of Medussa Muses, a mostly scripted podcast where I, Medussa, muse about various topics. This episode, I'm gushing about Black femmes, the revolutionary nature of our existence, and how our labor is always stolen or demanded for little to nothing. But before we hop deep into the conversation, I'd like to get some definitions established. When I say Black femmes, I'm referring to all women and including non-binary people like myself who are femme-presenting and comfortable with it. I say this because we are all affected by misogynoir, which is misogyny that targets Black women and people perceived as women specifically. So to be concise and inclusive, I use the term femmes. With that out of the way, let's talk about intersectionality. This term was made by a Black woman to explain the different ways that society discriminates against her and makes life difficult. For instance, a Black woman goes to an interview where there are only 3 other candidates for a job: a white man, a Black man, and a white woman. After they are all interviewed, the Black woman notices some sexist questions sprinkled in with some racism. At the end of the interview, she is denied the job and accuses the man of being sexist and racist. But the man retorts with the fact that he hired the white woman and the Black man. In this instance, it's important to recognize the intersection of the woman's identity as a Black woman, because it's obvious that this man discriminated against her. But to view his racism and sexism as separate and not two things that intersect in his mind, giving him a specific idea about Black women, is a disservice that ignores this woman's identity. The truth is that this man was being both racist and sexist, and it didn't matter that he hired a white woman and a Black man. His discrimination was against this Black woman. And that's how you're supposed to use intersectionality, to find the intersections of marginalized identities, not to play the oppression Olympics. And it's worth noting that people who possess multiple marginalized identities tend to experience discrimination more frequently, but this doesn't make them the mouthpieces of oppression. It does mean these individuals have more incentive to end the social structures that perpetuate marginalization. Enter Black femmes. We belong to 2 marginalized groups: Black people and women. However, we are largely forgotten by both groups because of how our identities intersect with the other. Some white women will get angry at us for defending Black men from their racism, and some Black men will get upset when we call out their sexism, but both will call us traitors. So we are marginalized by both groups. Even during the civil rights movement, Black women's voices were largely ignored. I remember watching an intellectual video where she discusses how it was a Black woman who explained to King how Black women were being left behind in his movement. You see, King spoke out about getting jobs for Black men and desegregating schools, but he didn't speak about welfare, which was the only thing helping Black mothers put food in their children's plate. But fortunately, King wasn't our only civil rights leader, just the one that history has allowed us to remember. There were Black women in the movement who demanded that the government give more to welfare and other social programs. So if you're a white person on welfare, you have Black women to thank for it. In fact, there's a lot of labor that Black femmes do that you have to thank us for, and should stop demanding we do this labor for free. Here's a few labor roles to give you an idea. Let's start with a classic. While a lot of people don't remember Mammy from the various old literatures such as Gone with the Wind, they still treat Black femmes like Mammy, and even expect the Mammy treatment. For those of you who don't know, Mammy was a house slave in that movie, and she attended to Scarlett O'Hara's every need and acted as her confidant who gave her much needed advice and enjoyed being her house slave. While this is usually a trope done with white women, sometimes white men will want the same treatment from their Black femme partners, treating them as if their only purpose in the relationship is to uphold them. Worse, in the case of employment, if a Black femme is hired as a babysitter or a nanny, it's expected that they will care for these children as if they're their own, or even better. But that's not the end of these tropes. Let's examine another stereotypical labor expected of Black femmes known as the sassy Black friend. The sassy Black friend is typically a Black femme or gay man who is usually the friend of a white person, usually a woman, who is sassy but always gives no-nonsense advice and would fight for their friend no matter the consequences or for comedic purposes until the cops are involved. This stereotype was popularized on sitcoms, but can be observed in almost all movies and TV shows where the cast is majority white. And the kicker is that white people expect the black people to behave in this manner. If we snap at them for this bullshit, we're assholes. But here's yet another stereotype that I actually struggle with because it involves fetishization of black femmes. And as someone who enjoys consensual fetishization, it's a bit blurry for me. So, let's talk about the wild woman. Black femmes are often compared to tigers, panthers, and jaguars. This stereotype often involves the imagery of a black woman wearing African tribal clothes or what's thought to be African tribal clothes or even like a loincloth and being a wild animal that a man must tame or conquer. This fetishization is more popular with white men, and it actually birthed the term jungle fever, which is a derogatory term for when a white man dates or has sex with a black woman. And while the term has fallen out of use, the sentiment associated with it has not. White men continue to view black femmes as sexual creatures and pursue us as though it's something we'll just deliver out of instinct. But let's not leave out the people who demand the most out of black femmes. Black men. To black men, we are expected to be ride or die chicks. We're expected to stand by black men no matter what because we're black and we live under white supremacy, and let them tell it they have it worse. Because of this. These men think that we're supposed to take their abuse and never say a word about it or expect us to fight them. Worse, are the men who worship black women as queens, because they are usually quick to tell black femmes what is or isn't queen behavior and will police our bodies as if they have a say over what we should wear or what we should do. Among these men are also those who use us as surrogate mothers who are supposed to attend to their every need and educate them on command. Now just take a moment and imagine going through one day having to navigate these identities. You wake up and your white woman roommate is having problems with her boyfriend. You two don't talk much, but she's crying and wants you to give her advice. You escape the house and get to work. Let's say you work as a barista and all day you run into these different people wanting different roles from you. You get hit on by a white dude who's aggressively trying to get you to his apartment after your shift. Another white woman, though not crying, asks you for advice. A black man approaches you trying to call you queen and tell you how you should get with him and stop working. Day in and day out, these roles are placed on you, and you must either play by them or rip them off. Regardless of your choice, it's tiring, and by the end of the day, you just want to retreat and relax. But there's a reason why black femmes can't. We are the mule of the world. We are marginalized in such a manner that we are objectified even within our own groups for belonging to another group. We suffer the effects of anti-blackness, which has jailed and killed many a black man, but because they die in higher rates than we do, we're supposed to take a back seat. But they forget about black trans women are dropping, and medical racism kills black femmes, whether it be childbirth or gender-affirming care. Yes, police brutality is a problem, but it's one that's shared among the black community, and racism affects us all equally but differently. Not to mention the black femmes that fall under the woman identity. Even within those circles, there's these bioessentialist trans exclusionary jackasses who deny the womanhood of people who experience the same misogyny that they experience, all because they're uncomfortable with their own womanhood, and make it the problem of other people instead of looking deep inside and seeing where their insecurity comes from. Not to mention the rampant racism that white femmes and non-black femmes throw in our general direction. There is no safe harbor for black femmes. We can't trust Black men and white people to make room for us, let alone make safe spaces. That's why we make our own spaces. We lead our own activist groups. We are our own advocates. That's why you see a lot of Black femmes leading or being in the chain of command of a lot of progressive movements. We have to make things happen to protect ourselves. But just because this is how it is, doesn't mean this is how it has to be. If you're not a Black femme, here's how you can support the Black femmes in your life, or just existing near you. When speaking to Black femmes, don't make the conversation about yourself. If you don't know that person, they likely don't care, nor do they have the time to do emotional labor for you. Don't treat Black femmes like walking educators or caretakers. We do not owe you labor. Generally ask yourself that if someone asked you what you were about to ask, would it be okay? This really is a treat others the way you want to be treated moment. Thank you for listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it, please become a patron on my Patreon or make a one-time donation on Ko-fi. I hope to see you next time. Until then, keep it cozy.